Any outlaw regime that has ties to terrorist groups and seeks or possesses weapons of mass destruction is a grave danger to the civilized world and will be confronted.
Secret combinations, lusting for power, gain, and glory are flourishing. A secret combination that seeks to overthrow the freedom of all lands, nations, and countries is increasing. Its evil influence and control over America and the entire world.
We are instructed to give unto you the law of consecration, as contained in the book of Doctrine and Covenants, in connection with the law of the gospel and the law of sacrifice, which you have already received. It is that you do consecrate yourselves, your time, talents, and everything with which the Lord has blessed you, or with which he may bless you, to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, for the building up of the kingdom of God on the earth, and for the establishment of Zion. Each of you, bring your right arm to the square. You and each of you covenant and promise before God, angels, and these witnesses at this altar, that you do accept the law of consecration as contained in the Doctrine and Covenants, in that you do consecrate yourselves, your time, talents, and everything with which the Lord has blessed you, or with which he may bless you, to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, for the building up of the kingdom of God on the earth, and for the establishment of Zion. Each of you, bow your head and say yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have faith that the Constitution will not be saved in Washington.
Tithing will keep your name enrolled among the people of God and protect you in the day of vengeance and burning.
We should also be cautious about the motivation of the one who provides information. That's why the scriptures warn us against priestcraft.
The mandate given by the First Presidency and the presiding bishopric is to only focus on financial growth. EPA employees are told that the money will be used after the second coming of Jesus Christ or during Armageddon right before he would come again.
When added all up, it shows the fund gained more than $6 billion in one of the most difficult financial years in American history.
stock market that has lost, and I want you to make sure you're hearing this number correctly, $4 trillion of market value since its all-time high less than a month ago. I'm talking on February the 19th.
Tonight, as we end the week and have a whole nother day of markets, the U.S. stock market has now lost $6.4 trillion in just 2 days.
Travis Wayne Goodsell, 1 John chapter 3, verse 15. Whosoever hateth his brother is a murderer, and ye know that no murderer hath eternal life abiding in him. So as a man thinketh, so is he. Jacob chapter 7, verse 24. And it came to pass that peace and the love of God was restored again among the people. And they searched the Scriptures, and hearkened no more to the words of this wicked man. And it came to pass that many means were devised to reclaim and restore the Lamanites to the knowledge of the truth. See the connection, Mormons? Search the Scriptures, knowledge of the truth. But it was all in vain, for they delighted in wars and bloodshed, and they had an eternal hatred against us, their brethren, and they sought by the power of their arms to destroy us continually. Mosiah chapter 10, 16 and 17. And again they were wroth with him, because he departed into the wilderness, as the Lord had commanded him, referring back to Nephi and Laman. And he took the records which were engraven upon the plates of brass, for they said that he robbed them. They had no interest in the plates of brass. They were going to destroy them anyway. They were just using it as an excuse. And thus they have taught their children that they should hate them, and that they should murder them, and that they should rob and plunder them, and do all they could to destroy them. Therefore, they have an eternal hatred towards the children of Nephi. It is probably the most abominable of human nature to use denialism in order to hate another person for their religion. And even probably it is worse to use a religion to do that kind of hatred, to deny another person's religion using your religion so that you can justify your hatred and thus holy war against them. In ancient times, might established right. As one nation emerged and conquered the previous conquering nation, their king became the one true kingdom, and their gods became the one true gods over all the others that they conquered. And we then see the Jews who started on the mountaintop of Salem, who lived a peaceful life, because that's what Salem means. Peace. Until the Babylonians came and conquered the land from the Egyptians, and would eventually conquer Jerusalem. And the Jews were removed from their land. The Persians restored them to their land to allow them to rebuild the temple. The Greeks would then overrun the temple, destroy the altar for the Greek practices, being rebuilt with a new altar, and begin the practice of sacral prostitution, paying for sex with a woman in the temple. And they justified it as it was part of the creation story, recreation, the perpetuation of the species, but for payment. Jews would call this the abomination of desolation. The Maccabean revolt would get their temple back. They would restore the altar and do away with the process of prostituting women for sex. Then the Romans came, and even though the Jews were allowed to continue to worship their religion, they had to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And the Roman army were stationed around the walls of the temple, as the Jews were literally held hostage, even though the Romans allowed religious freedom. It was under conditions, under the watchful eye of Big Brother. Thus the Jews did not like that, and tried numerous times to free themselves from the Roman occupation, and it was met with utter destruction. The temple was destroyed again, and destroyed on the exact same day, 9th of Av. Then you get a whole bunch of congregations from therapeutic groups, healers. They were similar to the Qumran community of Jews. They wrote similar stories of prophecy of the future coming of a Jewish Christ. That one day they would be free from their oppression, depression, suppression. And then came Roman Emperor Constantine, who forced congregational leaders to gather the Council of Nicaea, in which they were then forced to give up their religion, give up their Christ, if they wanted money for their congregation. And one religion was created. It was not an evolutionary development from Jews to Christians. That is the big lie. Constantine destroyed the religions to create Christianity. And in the creation of Christianity with the first creed, the Jewish prophecies of their coming of a Christ in the latter days were now turned into literal histories. And those literal histories, well, hey, you can put them in chronological order and create a Bible. And the first commandment in the chronological order literal histories is have sex, for which Christianity forbid. What the hell? But now that they are literal histories, the Jews are now responsible for murdering Jesus of Christianity. Oh my God. And so the Jews, who obviously did not murder Jesus because Jesus did not exist, he couldn't have, the Jews were utterly destroyed by the Romans. And now they're to blame for being utterly destroyed by the Romans. And were chased around Europe for 1700 years. And this continuation of hatred of the Jews for something they did not do, that their authors of their scriptures did not write, was then used in World War II Nazi Germany as they were rounded up for what we call today the Holocaust. And despite this fact of history, there are denialists that it ever happened. The worst form of human behavior. And those denialists are from both Islam and Christianity. Islam would emerge in 600 CE as those Babylonians who were chased into Saudi Arabia when the Persians conquered them would eventually produce Muhammad, who was taught the Christian Bible, believing that it was literal history, chronological order. And he decided to create his own religion, claimed that he was the Jewish Christ, claiming that he went to the top of the mountain. and received the word from Allah for the Quran. And began with his military group for his missionary service, going from village to village, forcing conversion with the threat of murder. Join us or die. And then the village would be burned, the women would be raped into polygamous harem groups. They would be covered up and hidden with the religious symbol of their sexual abuse. And expanded their conquering as Christians would try to reclaim Jerusalem. Islam would build the abomination of the mosque on the ruins of the Jerusalem temple and managed to keep it there without getting destroyed. As Westerners would go on to be ignorant about Islam, being indoctrinated in Christianity, knowing that they were heathen, just not knowing them, of their militant abuse. So when Poppy Bush would pick a fight over the oil, we had no clue how to interpret their language, translate it correctly, to know their military strategy. And thus is why Westerners have such a prolonged war against Islam in their country, in the occupied Middle East. Even the Israelis, when defending themselves against Hamas, would come to find out that Islam had been preparing for that October 7th for a very long time, having built a tunnel network all throughout the city of Gaza and connecting it to the United Nations, who were aiding and abetting in preparing the war against Israel. And thus why the United Nations keeps condemning Israel for what Hamas did, because they are siding with Hamas, the terrorists, just as the people are, who refused to flee to save their family and instead stayed to fight against Israel for what they caused. And the whole world condemns Israel for defending their existence because of the eternal hatred by Christians and Islam against the Jews, who never did anything wrong. They just lived on the mountain that they called peace. So then came Joseph Smith. There were no reason to create a religion. The Smith family were Congregationalists in Vermont. Joseph Smith Sr. studied Jewish Kabbalah was struggling in the new America to support his family, as being a farmer was a very difficult job to maintain because of weather conditions from the volcanic explosion in the Philippines. So they were forced to move to Palmyra. And in Palmyra, in 1818, I believe it was May 7th, he was made a Master Mason of the York Rites Freemasonry, different from Scottish Rites, because they have the Knights Templar, not the 33 degrees. Of the Ontario Lodge number 23 in Canandaigua, New York, which was south of Manchester, south of Palmyra. And so it was a short distance away, and so Daddy, of course, would have the car, the horse and carriage, or at least the horse. As Hiram, being the oldest son, after Alvin died, would go to the Palmyra York Rites Lodge as a member. And all would have been that kind of life. Running the farm, being a part of a fraternal order, peaceful, harmonious, nothing to worry about, except for the War of 1812. The Illuminati had been trying to destroy America by infiltration, rise up in number, rise up in rank, take over leadership, destroy New World Order. There were instances in 1800, and then the War of 1812. A guy by the name of William Morgan found out about this Illuminati plot in the United States of America to infiltrate the Scottish Rites Freemasonry, rise up in number, rise up in rank, take over leadership, destroy, conquer the United States of America. And that it was two-pronged. They were intending to try to do it back then, but build up America to destroy it at the latter-day time period that the Jews had given the dates for in their scriptures, which were turned literal histories by the Christians with the First Creed. Because of that First Creed, the dates were magically hidden from anybody reading the scriptures with the interpretation of Christianity. And thus the Jews, likewise, their biblical Hebrew text, eternal hatred, we're getting to it, Mormons. Likewise, the Jews, with their First Creed and their eternal hatred, caused the Jews, in the creation of their biblical Hebrew text, to cover up Paleo-Hebrew script, which also gave the dates for the coming of their Jewish Christ according to Jewish prophecy. And so the Jews had lost the knowledge of their own scriptures because of Constantine's First Creed. Elohim now became masculine, singular mastery, or whatever crap they created to explain it, with the multiple personality disorder translation, despite it being one and only one translation that could come from it. It's a visionary language in the beginning with Paleo-Hebrew. You see the words. Visionary language, like seers. And these Illuminati knew this. They knew that Revelation chapter 12, verses 1, 2, and they didn't know 5. That's strange. They should have. Nobody knew. It's just me who figured it out. What the hell? Was the date to start the year of the latter days. And that Revelation 19 was the last year of the latter days. And so William Morgan came to Western New York looking for a York Rites Lodge who would assist him in the publication of a book that would warn America, and it had to be encoded so that the enemy wouldn't know that they know. And he found Joseph Smith Sr. in his lodge, where he had been fronted money from the Batavian Press, David Miller, and had a home there to take care of his family while he was out in Canandaigua writing the book. And at 116 pages, the enemy found out that William Morgan knew and was writing the book. And he was wrongfully arrested as a death threat to stop writing the book. And so Joseph Smith Sr., as the Master Mason, had the duty and responsibility, as he would write in the book using William Morgan's name, about the duties and responsibilities of a Master Mason, and helped William Morgan flee the country, cannot take his family for their safety. There has to be plausible deniability. And took on the responsibility to finish the book. He knew Sidney Rigdon. Sidney Rigdon had obtained a book from the Pittsburgh Press that the author had died, and therefore was never able to get it published. And so the Pittsburgh Press was going to throw it away. And so it was given away because they can't publish it. And so there is no crime in what Sidney Rigdon did in obtaining it. Nevertheless, nobody was supposed to ever know because he's dead. Nobody was ever supposed to know of that book. Sidney Rigdon did not know that the author, Solomon Spaulding, had read the book to his local tavern and even to his kids for bedtime stories. Oops. Mormonism Unveiled got published in 1834, exposing this. But innocently, they believed that they could use that as a template for the continuation of the book. As Mosiah, Moses, Yah, the Jewish Christ, would be the book within the Book of Mormon, as it would come to be named. And so they needed funding for the book. They can't be fronted from the publishing company like William Morgan was, because the enemy would find out. They are on the hunt for whoever has these 116 pages. They are on the hunt to murder them and destroy the 116 pages. And thus, Egyptian gold treasure plates running through the forest, being 200 pounds, and Mormons are clueless to this day. And knowing Jewish Kabbalah, knowing the scriptures in the learning of the Jews, Joseph Smith Sr., as Junior, would go to Daddy's lodge and attend their meetings as often as occasion would permit. Was made the Jewish forerunner Christ, Messiah ben Joseph, to prepare the way for the coming of the Jewish Christ from the threat of this Illuminati group, who chose to be the prophesied enemy, thinking that they could get away with it because obviously the Jews can't know of the future, even though they knew the dates. There can't be a coming of a human being. That's stupid. That can't be real. So obviously, Jesus is real. That's not real. The Museum. God, I don't understand humans. It can't be real. It has to be not real in order for it to be real and believed by us. Oh my God! And so yes, QAnon. Exactly. What's real can't be real. Truth isn't true. Reality isn't real. So says the guy who lost everything and was humiliated in a movie with his hand down his pants. You gave up your life for Trump, did you? I don't understand why Trump isn't rescuing Rudy Giuliani. I don't understand what happened there. Is there a falling out? Did something happen? Or does the devil just not support his own? Unless it has to do for his own personal agenda. Like unleashing criminals, violent criminals, to unleash them again on America in a coming day. Anyway. And so to publish the book, Junior had worked on the farm of Martin Harris. And had obtained rocks in the well that he had dug, and knew from Daddy under the New Israelites of Vermont, where he learned Jewish Kabbalah, how to do a rock and a hat trick variation. And so, yeah, he would, as a kid, hide things of other people and then say that he can find them using his rock and a hat, and sure enough, he found them. You know, just a little kid's game. Foibles of youth. But for some reason, Martin Harris believed that it was true. that Joseph Smith actually had magical powers. Believed it all. And thus said, I will pay for the book if I can be a part of it. Great. So Senior had Junior take Martin Harris from Palmyra to Harmony, north of Pittsburgh, in between Palmyra and Manchester Farm, and Ohio, where Sidney Rigdon was, right smack in the middle. And at 116 pages, as Junior made a copy of the original before Martin Harris got there, and then read to Martin Harris from the copy, and thus the sheet between them, so that Martin Harris couldn't see that there are no gold plates. And thus Martin Harris believes that it was all done through the rock in a hat. He didn't know. Junior's firstborn son died, and Martin Harris took advantage of that to run off with 116 pages back to Palmyra to his anti-Mason committee group from 9/11/1826, when William Morgan was falsely arrested, and Senior saved him. Because he was a little uncomfortable with the amount of Knights Templar Freemasonry stuff in the original 116 pages. And so Junior almost blew the whole thing. He and his wife went to the Methodist Church of Emma's family, and they had known about Junior being arrested as a glass looker and wanted nothing to do with a witch in their church. It's just a kid's game. It was Justice Winchell who joined because he wanted polygamous wives and taught people divination and how to forge metals. And people mistakenly make forgeries. But nonetheless, when you add another definition to a word, people run with it. Nonetheless. And so Joseph and Emma were banned from the Methodist Church and banned from Harmony, north of Pittsburgh, along with Emma's family. Thanks, Joseph. And so they traveled to the Smith farm in Manchester, and section 3 is given. Senior was pissed with Junior, as nobody knew yet about Sidney Rigdon, so Sidney Rigdon kept on going during all this. But now Senior had to rewrite the 116 pages, and so he put more Jewish Kabbalah in there, less York Rites, Knights Templar. So you do see Solomon's Temple, but that's also Jewish Kabbalah. So it's taking away from Freemasonry. Junior is still the Messiah Ben Joseph, but in this particular case, Junior is actually written in 2 Nephi chapter 3, letting those who would join Joseph's church would see that Joseph was prophesied and is preparing them for the coming of their Jewish Kabbalah Christ in the latter days, who would be among them a Mormon. And so the Book of Mormon's completed, as Junior has to sit in timeout in what used to be called Harmony, but was no longer called Harmony, Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, near where Joseph was arrested for being a glass looker and where he eloped with Emma to get married. So that was convenient, and that's how they knew about that other Harmony, so that when they would come out and still need Martin Harris's $2,000 to publish the book, assuming that he didn't get them in trouble, which, yeah, after a year going by and nobody coming down to shut them up, murder them, yeah, it's clear that the Palmyra Committee didn't find anything in the original document in the first place. But to play it safe, Section 10, a year later, Bruce R. McConkie put the right date in. Don't put 1828, it's 1829. A marvelous work and a wonder is about to come forth among the children of men, and we have yet to write it. And we're not even going to start writing it for another couple months. But it's about to come forth. So yes, that's why Sidney Rigdon added in some of his unique religious practices of baptism, sacrament, from Alexander Campbell's Baptist congregation that Sidney Rigdon left because Alexander Campbell didn't want to revise the whole Bible. He just wanted to revise the New Testament. Sidney Rigdon wanted to revise the whole Bible. So as payment, when Sidney Rigdon was joined through the clever use of getting Parley P. Pratt, the Book of Mormon, and Palmyra, took it back to Sidney Rigdon. Oh, this is great. Let's all go. Took his whole congregation with him to join the church. And that's why Kirtland became the first headquarters. And Sidney Rigdon was put right to work to help Joseph with revision of the Bible and able to have sermons on Sunday, just as his congregation in Ohio, as payment for services rendered in writing the Book of Mormon. And yet it just amazes me how people can be so dumb to think, well, he didn't join the church until later that year. Obviously, he couldn't be a part of it. Senior was brilliant in covering it up. Still to this day, it is just me who figured it out, despite Mormonism Unveiled, despite over 36 plagiarized contemporary works found within the Book of Mormon, identified by anti-Mormon, antichrist, apostate corahors, despite it being turned Christian. Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball found out. 1832, they joined the church, rose up in number, rose up in rank, took over leadership, destroyed new religious order, fled the country, established his Illuminati Luciferian religion in the Salt Lake Valley. Thus the inverted pentagrams. Very plain, pure, and most precious, and Mormons still to this day are in denial of it, thinking that they can convert with threats of violence. Join us or die was their slogan in 1838 for the Danite War, using the same exact patterns that they were plotting to use in the latter days against the United States of America. Told Thomas B. Marsh, this is what we're going to do. Thomas B. Marsh wanted nothing to do with it. So George Albert Smith would then make up a story that it was his wife who was to blame for his excommunication as he was defending his wife's honor. And Joseph Smith said, "No, you're wrong. Get out." Well, Joseph was in Liberty Jail during all that time, and it couldn't have been him. And yet, both Hinckley and Monson would talk about it at the pulpit of conference to justify enslaving Mormons to obey them or die. It is abominable what this church has done to Joseph's religion, to the Book of Mormon and its Jewish religion. Far worse than what Constantine did to the Jews. Because now, instead of a dove raping a 14-year-old girl, it's now Daddy, who's from outer space, Kolob, coming to Earth and raping his 14-year-old daughter. A chosen vessel. Chosen vessel. See, Christians can call Mary a vessel because there's no seed, there's no egg in order to keep her a virgin. She's just a vessel. But Mormonism, for Nelson to get up and say that Mary is a chosen vessel is just cringeworthy. And all Mormons go, "Oh, dear, church is so true. I want to be raped just like Mary." Well, you're already being prostituted like the Greeks did to the Jerusalem temple. Because all of the abominable practices were created by Brigham Young, forging documents, framing and blaming Joseph for them. And Mormons are too stupid to figure out, hey, wait a minute, we're not supposed to practice priestcraft. It says so in our keystone scripture. And section 119 isn't even by Joseph. He doesn't have his name there. It just shows up in the text in 1844 after Joseph is assassinated by Willard Richards and John Taylor. And Mormons never question it. And then Oakes would get up in conference and say, well, there are some laws that were never fully practiced in the beginning, but took time. Lorenzo Snow's famous talk. It was a movie. And he's making a scripture. The conference talk that never was. Because he thinks you're stupid. And apparently you are. Dear God. So, yes, everything this church does, everything this church says is an abomination. It is pure hatred. Because it is hatred towards Joseph Smith's religion. Mormons are anti-Mormon. That is, is it irony for Mormons to call anti-Mormon, antichrist apostates anti-Mormons? Dear God, for anybody to not know their Book of Mormon, not know the words of Joseph Smith, when it clearly states Jewish, and then to allow Mormons to call you anti-Mormons. Dear God. Bullies are stupid people by nature. And if you knew this, all you need to do is know the truth behind their lies, so that you can put them in their place, as I have had to do this whole latter days. And yet, bullies succeed when the victim doesn't have a knowledge of the subject matter that they are being bullied about. And so, yes, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints uses the religion card to cover up their crimes and get away with them. To bully anyone who dares expose the truth. That's why September 6th, even though they were finding stuff out, were immediately attacked by this church to shut them up, to keep them from actually finding out the truth. You know, great, you found out about a rock and a hat, Joseph is a witch, fine, we'll allow that. Fine. We'll just say it's the gift and power of God. We deny translation, nonetheless. Joseph never said he was a translator, despite having said it multiple times. You dumbass, Guy. You dumbass. You know, they work for the church, and they all deny Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon. They all deny him. They have to, in order for the church to be true. And so, let's get to the news. By talking about World War II again, the Nazis used medical doctors and created psychologists to perform human experimentation on the Jews, to torture them unto death. Just horrible abuses that just should bring any innocent person to tears, just into a complete collapse of horror for what they did. And yet, because of the graphic horror, it is not being exposed well enough. Steven Spielberg, in his Schindler's List, tried to expose the graphic horror that was done. And because it was rated R, Christians didn't want their kids seeing it. And there was a high school that showed the movie in Northern California, and the kids were mocking and laughing through it. And so Steven Spielberg had to come out there and talk with them. America, among other allied nations, gave asylum to these inhumane abusers of the Jews, rather than locking them up and executing them for their crimes. It was all done in secret, and it's been leaked, declassified, that they were put to work with the CIA to learn, to figure out how to brainwash the masses, to thank their American liberators with utter destruction in the future. Hey, perfect timing with the Illuminati and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so MK Ultra, the little frames put in the movie theaters, let's all go to the lobby, let's all go to the lobby, let's all go to the lobby and have ourselves some snacks. Monty Burns for president. Simpsons. So funny because it's true. I miss The Simpsons. That was a good show. Too bad it's gone, because it's only streaming on Disney. Gone. I like the days when they were making DVDs. Gone. And so I'm missing out on a lot of fun stuff. I see YouTube clips of how they're mocking the Islamic Snow White, who's crying because nobody likes her because she's a privileged princess. Destroying Snow White. Complaining the whole time. As Disney, of course, cast the Wicked Witch with a Jew. Wonder Woman, of all people. Hell. Leave it to Disney to destroy Disney. And now they're in charge of Star Wars and Marvel to destroy them. God. Anyway. And so psychology was in secret in the beginning in America, as nationwide tests would be conducted in certain locations, and eventually commercials would utilize psychology to trick people into purchasing their products. New and improved Tide. The old Tide that we said was the best is no longer the best. Now we have the best. Buy it, or be shamed as a housewife. Nonetheless, don't even get me going on makeup for women. The abuse that commercials did to housewives, and thus women, and thus little girls in the 80s. Psychologists set it all up. Psychologists turn men's fantasies into fetishes, into types, into identities. All to sabotage you, to keep you ignorant about what happened leading up to World War II Nazi Germany, what they did to gays, labeling them in advance. So once you have them all identified, then when you strike, you know exactly what blacklist to use to round them up. Yep. They allowed this to happen in these latter days. Oh, you get to change your birth certificate and your driver's license according to how you feel. And I warned you it was a trap. You didn't listen, and here we are. It's coming. You didn't learn from history, and so now history is being repeated because Stephen Miller is a Nazi. You knew who they were when you took them in. That was a brilliant. I am so inspired. And you didn't watch it, did you? You didn't watch. Brilliant. So, Utah embraced psychology. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is involved in the stock market. When that was leaked in 2019 by the whistleblower for Ensign Peak Advisors, nobody kept investigating to find out more corruption of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Because there is more. If the church is involved in the stock market and it was a super sacred secret, you should have caught on. Because psychology, being in the educational systems to brainwash future prospective psychologists into their cult group of human torture, using victims of abuse as their major candidates for the education field, are then given credibility as a career field. They have doctor-client confidentiality so that nobody can know of their torture of the clients they bring in. And they get paid by the number of clients they have. And so, since there is no such thing as mental retardation, because if you do have problems in the brain, it's physical. You need to see a medical doctor. There is no such thing as a mental retardation. It's all made up. And in order to make up the diagnoses that they pretend to have, they use fallacy arguments. Yeah, you have no clue what that is. That's a big technical term. It's in the study of logic. There's sound argument, and then there's unsound argument. Sound argument uses logic, Socratic methodology. Unsound argument uses fallacies. And so to simplify it for you, logic is truth, fallacy is falsehood, lies, deceptions. Everything a psychologist uses is a lie. There is not a single shred of truth in them. They are from Nazi Germany. They are performing human experimentations. And so, as medical doctors have a Hippocratic oath to do no harm, psychologists don't. And so, in order to drug, to human experiment, psychologists are used to run drug testing on humans for Big Pharma. And because the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is involved in the stock market, yeah, they embrace psychology, they embrace Big Pharma. All you had to do was keep on going after it got leaked that this church is involved in the stock market. You didn't, did you? You didn't. So you didn't know. And you didn't believe me all these years after I found out. So, KSL. Well, we'll start with KUTV2. Apparently, they have turned into Trump TV. After Trump took over with his inauguration, KUTV2 only covers Trump news. They literally plagiarize Trump's stuff. Everything. Yesterday, for example, they put the full press conference in their news segment on their YouTube channel. They didn't summarize it, have news commentary about it. Nope, they just put her whole speech in there on their channel. Trump has his own YouTube channel now. It's there. And yet KUTV2 is plagiarizing Trump with copyright violations, and YouTube won't stop it. What I find fascinating, though, is that Trump's The White House YouTube channel, when you watch their videos, you see the recommended list on the side, because I use a computer, not my cell phone. And all of it is the White House. Nothing else. Only the White House is recommended when you watch the White House videos. When you watch my video, yeah. The church is true. The church is true. The church is true. But for the White House, the White House. I find that fascinating. I'm well aware that YouTube's algorithms can be manipulated. Oops, busted. And because of the 2 breakout videos, YouTube pulled the stunt of changing their design to shut me up and silence me on those 2 breakout videos to make sure that they don't get out too far. God, it's just unbelievable, the abuse of YouTube. This is the hatred of a religion. To hate my channel is religious hatred against me. Mormons don't care. And so KSL is run and operated by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And they've come out and said it's a necessary evil to show commercials of all immodest women. We have no choice in the matter. Nonetheless, in order to work for the church, you have to be a Mormon with a temple recommend, which means you're paying tithing. And your tithing is deducted from your paycheck. And so the majority of KSL, if not all of them, are Mormon. Right, Garna? I tried to save you. You didn't let me. Tried to save you. The church was pimping you out, and I guess you finally got a guy. Or is that just a ring for show? I'm not seeing you get pregnant. And so the tithing then gets put into the stock market. And so KSL is being used to launder money through the stock market. Any employee for the church is being used to launder money for the church and the stock market. But KSL yesterday had a 2-video segment, which could have more if I checked today, on overcoming the stigma of mental retardation. The church, after doing all my videos exposing this from Nazi Germany, to thank their American liberators as they're destroying America, as they're getting shut down here in Utah, as centers are closing because of the abuse, as psychologists are going to prison, as they get busted. It is a collapsing field, and yet the church, because they're invested in the stock market, still is desperately trying to bolster it up, to increase the stock value. That's all that this is for. And KSL is helping this. Stigma is the Christian word for what they did with their religious abuse and hatred of the Jews. Because now, literal history Jesus was actually nailed to a cross, rather than giving you the day and the hour of his coming. And so they created the word stigmata, from which stigma comes from. And so now mentally retarded people are now crucified just like Jesus. The stigma of mental retardation. Because that's what it all is. It doesn't matter what they rename it. It's all a deception. It's all the same thing. If you're special, yeah, they just called you mentally retarded, kid. Your parents just called you mentally retarded. You're not special. You're not mentally retarded. If you have brain problems, it's a medical condition. See a medical doctor. God. And so, yes, they are the cause of creating an expansion on autism. The autism, as in Bruce Willis's Mercury Rising, that is a legitimate mental medical condition. But to have a person who needs a comfort animal because taking tests is stressful? No! That is not a mental retardation. That is the psychologists who were put into the grade schools to turn kids into sensitive snowflakes so that they can be sabotaged right now as they're all groated up and demanding privileges in this nation above and beyond others. You fell for the trap, and now you're being abused for it. So, yeah. Let's go over that, because it's the same process. And I already did, actually. So yeah, the psychologists, their companies are involved in the stock market. The healthcare systems for insurance are involved in the stock market. The big pharma is in the stock market. All of it is all tied together. And so the church is invested in the stock market as it was listed for Ensign Peak Advisors because of the whistleblower exposing the church. And so it's not just the tech companies that was the big news thing back then. It's everything. And so thus, in 2021, Fox 13 News Utah came out after 2020 to report on how the church made $6 billion for 2020 on the stock market for just Ensign Peak Advisors, whereas everybody else suffered that year. Thomas B. Marsh was told, and we were told something else, that his wife was to blame. You are not supposed to know that the church is the great and abominable church, Mormons. You are not supposed to study your Book of Mormon. Don't do it. Just get the right feeling. And so thus, why Utah pushes psychology and insurance for psychology and the big pharma for psychology and the centers, and thus have to get as many people as possible into psychology as not just employees but also as victims of the abuse of psychology, because the church needs to make the money. And so Utah is the #1 per capita of Mormon women taking depression drugs in the whole United States and the world and the universe because of this profiting off of human torture. That's all psychology is. Remember, Nazi Germany. It is a profitable thing to torture humans with, and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is on the forefront of profiting off of it. That's why they want conversion therapy brought back, LGBTQ. So, there you have it. Religious hate. Because the Church of Jesus Christ not only hates Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon, they're hating you to keep you stupid so that they can torture you and hold you in bondage. And you hate me for it, huh? Bleep you all. Bleep you all. LDS can't handle the truth. So, yeah, also, they're not speaking at devotionals either. The prophets, they've gone silent. Interesting. Interesting. So I'll keep watching. Maybe next week. Maybe next week. I don't know. Prophets are going silent. Just doing temple dedications. That's it. Because this year was supposed to be Armageddon. That's the whole point of this. That's what all of this is leading up to. So yes, Trump is failing to cause Armageddon. Stay tuned. We're all doomed because you won't believe the truth.